to write. One of the results is I write a test, and then I write a method between. I'll claim it for myself. So if you focus on the domain-specific language, the DSL, the domain-specific language of your problem domain, the interface will naturally follow as a reflection of your domain. That you don't need to focus on the UI. Don't worry about how you do things. Worry about the model. Worry about the database. Worry about the schema. And once you have that good and undefined and understood, then you can take, and the UI just naturally kind of flows from that. You just take and create, forms to create those records, and it should be simple, right? But we still go back to the second problem that I had, where we have structured versus unstructured data. This doesn't talk about how to actually write the test. It just basically tells you what you need to be looking for, what your focus needs to be. So naturally, somebody else came up with a better thing. So behavior-driven development. Behavior-driven development was created by Martin Fowler. Martin Fowler was one of the people who created the original Agile manifesto. So behavior-driven development is kind of intricately linked, intricately tied to Agile as a process, Agile as a technology or a technique. And here in behavior-driven development, we have a Gherkin file or a Gherkin syntax. And the original book, Behavior-Driven Development, written by Martin Fowler, was called Behavior-Driven Development with Cucumber. And Cucumber is a Ruby language. There's a Cucumber.js, lots of different kinds of ports of it. But basically, it uses Gherkin, Cucumber Gherkin. It uses Gherkin syntax to describe what behavior you want to happen. And if you're familiar with Agile, this should look very familiar to you. You have a story title, a feature. This is the thing I want to create. You have your story text as a blank. I want to blank so that I can blank. And now here at the bottom, this is kind of the unique piece that we have with behavior-driven development, is this given and when then stuff. And this should look very familiar if you saw the structured versus unstructured slide, in that we only want one when clause, because we only want to test for one behavior. We want our test to be atomic. The principles of test-driven design and domain-driven design still all apply to behavior-driven design because they're evolutions of one another. So this is great. This is exactly what we want to do. We say that after a user searches something and the page has this, then this, right? So when you look at this is declarative, right? It doesn't tell you anything specific. It doesn't tell you go to this URL, click on this thing, type in this box, right? That's what this does. Given I visit Google, I type in, search the title is a certain thing. The worst thing we have here is this when clause and 2 more and clauses. You don't want 3 when clauses, you want 1. It's a principle. So this is a BDD. Don't do this. Don't don't test for specific actions you want to happen or that can happen. You want to test for the behaviors that you want to happen. So this is declarative. It contains something. I've indexed the site, and a user searches. Users can search via input, via an API, via bot, whatever, Slack, So don't do that. Bad. So now I've told you what not to do. How do you do it? What's the real process? So like I described earlier, BDD is intricately tied in with Agile, and unsurprisingly, BDD starts with a story. the first thing, the way a story is created, obviously, is the client creates that story. Well, even though we want to make sure our stories are utilizing that Gherkin syntax, we don't want to paint our client into a corner. We don't want to make them feel defensive. We don't want them to not trust us or think that we're telling them they're wrong. We want to give them a framework that they can follow, but not force them into. So allow them to create whatever kind of prose they want. If they want to use Gherkin, let them, but just don't put any structure around it. But you add it to the backlog. The second step is when sprint grooming happens. The team, as a team, since that's what happens during a sprint grooming, is the team gets together and figures out what cards mean and how many points you should allocate to them and what cards you're going to put in the sprint plan. During this step, the product owner, the client, and the team together create a rough Gherkin text. Just a first draft. Agile principles still follow, obviously, so iteration is very important. Which takes us to our third step. And the developer takes that Gherkin, the specifications, their expectations that our client has, and iterates on that. They build code that passes a test. They figured out that the step definition that the client created or that was agreed upon wasn't actually the thing that they actually want. So you revise the step, you iterate again, you get to a point where you can, and whenever you do iterate, you take the change, you reflect it back in the story. So everyone that's on that story, everyone that's part of the team is notified when that story changes, when the requirements, the expectations of that story are different than what they originally were. So it gives everyone the ability to continuously buy into the story, continuously buy into the syntax. So everyone, from the client to the product owner to the sales guy to the developer to the dev lead, whoever, they're all working off the exact same words, the exact same order, the exact same characters, and those characters are tied one-to-one back down to your tests. The fourth part is you continuously integrate this code. So we work on teams. We don't work by ourselves. Well, usually, a lot of times we don't. But so this continuous integration and then testing is an important part, and that we want our testing to happen in a generic environment in the cloud that's not affected by our dev environment. So this process naturally will lead back to the developer iterating, more negotiation. So this process, this 3 and 4, kind of goes back and forth. Eventually, the Gherkin syntax is agreed upon by all parties. The tests are written, the tests pass, and finally, the developer can mark the story as complete. After that, the client goes in and verifies that the Gherkin syntax that's in that story is the Gherkin syntax is the stuff they want to actually happen. Actually satisfies their expectations. They don't need to go in and actually test the code. They don't actually need to go in and test the site, because they can be sure that the Gherkin syntax you're using is the exact thing that you're testing for. So if a client comes back later on after the process is done and says, this feature doesn't really do what I expected it or wanted it to, can we make it do this instead? And you can go back to the client and say, well, that's not what you specified, and we all agreed on this, so it's going to be a change order. Sorry about that. So it's one way that you can put the impetus back on the client to make sure that they know what they're talking about, that they're clearly defining to you exactly what they want. It doesn't let the client be lazy yet. Too many times I've had the experience where a client just naturally expects you to understand. They tell you something, they expect you to remember it, to understand it, and to go out and implement it. But they don't write it down anywhere, there's no meeting agendas, there's no notes, and what comes out is completely different from what went in at the beginning. I'm sure you're all aware of the telephone game and that we describe things to different people, and the output at the end is very different than the output at the beginning. So we want to make sure that everybody has the same syntax. Everybody's working off the exact same stuff. So key points in this whole process is that you negotiate the definition of done before and during development, but not after. You never let the client go back on their word and say, no, that's not what I meant. You change it, and I'm not going to pay you for it. You hold their feet to the fire that, that when it's done, it's done. Second key point is that in order to define what done is, we need to make sure that everybody's working off the same page. You know, pretty much the same stuff that I've been talking about most of this talk is that we need to make sure that everybody's working off the same syntax. Everybody's working off the same exact language. We don't copy paste anything. We don't translate into anything else. We use that code that they wrote, that everybody's agreed upon, to write our tests, to run our tests. And the third key point that I want to make is that unit testing is important. You know, we all want to unit test and keep our tests as atomic as possible, run it as an isolated environment as possible. But unit testing on its own doesn't prevent regression. You know, the interactions between services, the interfaces, different interfaces that services have, and the way the UI interacts with those services and the model play a big part, obviously. And just because you've tested unit tests doesn't mean it's going to pass. So I'll describe a little bit about, I'll show you a little demo about an easy way to actually create and do BDD. So if I can take and figure out how to get my thing to come up, it might be a little bit of a struggle because I haven't done it on this one yet, but So here, let me take and make it a little bit bigger. And so, start over here. I'll go ahead and hide this for a second. So let's just pretend that we have a empty project. You know, this is a generic project that I downloaded. It uses Wallaby. Wallaby is another test runner. We won't go over that right now, but it's a great thing. But bare package, right? There's no, the only thing we really modified was the package JSON, and all the package JSON really has that's of any importance is this test chimp watch, because I want to be able to run it from my editor. So we take and so we can take and run our test, and we should see that we get a terminal here. Oh. So it's watching, it's doing stuff. It says our features directory doesn't exist. So pretend like we created just cloned down a generic project and did nothing else besides open up a terminal and run test or run chimp watch. It says we need a features file. So let's go back over here to our directory, and we can take and comment this out for a second. And we can take and make it where it sees this. That chimp starts up again, and it opened a browser. Fantastic. Didn't do what I wanted it to do because this is not uncommented. But if we take and change everything, save the file again, you should see that it should reload the page. There it ran again. So the cool stuff that we are really concerned about in here is that chimp 1 watches our files, but 2, most importantly, is that whenever we get a failure, it tells us what we need to do. So we have this little function here, you know, module exports function, node stuff, and it even gives us a file name that we should use. So I'm not going to use that file name that it suggested. I'm just going to use blah.js, and we're going to take and uncomment it, save it, and it should kick off again. You see it kicking off down there, and the browser's right there. So chimp.js, which uses Gherkin, which uses Cucumber.js underneath, which uses Mocha to run all the tests. It's super fast. It watches. But the great thing that I really like about chimp is that its guiding principle is that it wants to be as painless as possible for developers to use. So without having chimp installed, without having any features or tests, all you really need to do is take and install chimp with npm install chimp-g, and it'll install everything you need. It'll install the Selenium server, it'll install all its dependencies, and once you have that done, let's take and go back to my presentation. once we have that done, we can just run chimp. So expectations, right? What do we really expect to get out of this whole BDD flow? Well, the first thing is that we want to reduce regression, obviously. We want to make sure that we don't create bugs. We also want to make sure that we prevent feature creep. Feature creep is insidious in software development, in that a client will say what he wants, and you'll make it, and they'll say, no, it's not what I wanted, make this instead. And as they go along, it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until where you're at the end is nowhere close to where you're at the beginning, but you're still charging the same, and that's not what we want to do. Other expectations, we eliminate the curse of the blank page, in that TDD has the curse of the blank page. We don't know where to start because we don't have anything to test, right? With BDD, you run chimp and it tells you what to do. You don't have to worry about what you write. And the last thing that BDD helps is that it helps us stop building the wrong things. In that too often we'll assume that we know exactly what a client wants. We'll build it, we'll iterate, we'll finish it, we'll tell them we're done, they'll use it, they'll like it a little bit, but it's not what they want. And that's really what it all comes down to. So my takeaway after this whole thing is that BDD is plausible for all of you. You can all use it. It's super simple. It takes less than 5 minutes to get up and running running your first test. The syntax is super simple. The way you write the JavaScript is modern. It uses nodes, so it uses a lot of the same ES6 idioms and func features that ES6 has. So it's really great and really nice. You can write really clean syntax. And yeah, so start doing BDD. It's not hard. Thank you. And here's my contact information if you care. Any questions? Anybody? Anybody want to know? Yes? Yes. Yeah, so the original book that was put out in 2001 is called the Agile Manifesto. And I mean, that's the other book that Martin Fowler did was, the specific book about this was he wrote a book called Behavior-Driven Design. He was the originator of the whole technique. So in that manner, I was trying to explain the intricate link that, you know, the guy who made Agile is the same guy who made this. This is Agile. So if you're not following this, you're not really doing Agile. Go ahead. There you go. All right. Yeah. Yep. That's the title, is Behavior-Driven Development with Cucumber. So, you know, that's the kind of further research that you can do. Yes? Right, so I tried to go over the testing library in that. All right, so his question, if I understood, was do you have any recommendations for specific technologies? Testing libraries? Right, so I like Chimp a lot. I've used a lot of different frameworks, but Chimp is, you know, because of its foundation on making it easy for the developer, I really like it, because I really like it when things make it easier on me. Chimp underneath uses Cucumber, like I've been talking about. It uses Mocha as the test runner. You can it uses Mocha when you're testing in node environment, and it uses Jasmine on the front end when you're testing in the browser. And it tests by default in the browser. So it by default uses Jasmine's expect syntax. Basically Mocha's, you know, the same structure you'd create with a Mocha file is the same structure you can do with this. So you can take your Mocha files that you have already, put them in this, change a title or whatever to be a regular expression to match the Gherkin step, and then that way you can take and keep your same Mocha tests that you have already written and use them in your different workflow with Cucumber. So yeah, Chimp uses WebDriver IO underneath, which is Node, that uses Selenium, which is Java. So it's there's a lot of different technologies that are kind of moving together, but really the only really name that you should need to be worried about or concerned about is Chimp. Chimp does everything. Yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of other tools. Cucumber is not a JavaScript-only technology. It was originally written in Ruby. So if you're a Ruby person, you probably already know about BDD and Gherkin and stuff like that. So it's a common thing. I love JavaScript. That's why I use JavaScript. JavaScript's extremely popular these days, extremely simple to get started with, and you can test whatever you want to if you use Selenium. So yeah. Any other questions? Yes? Right. So, trust is obviously very important when you're talking with clients. Trust is that the clients need to trust that you're the expert, that you know what you're talking about, and that there's a certain process that you work. And if you want to get what you want, you work the process because it assures that you will get what you want instead of you just telling me in an amorphous manner. In the same way that I talked about structured and unstructured data, we can talk to the client and show them very obviously, this is easy to understand. This is not easy to understand. If it's easy to understand, it will cost you less money, and they will naturally just go along with it. So it's also I find that if you have stories, if you have big long text, big long blobs of text, it's really hard to tell the client that they're wrong, that they don't know what they're talking about, because they're using the language that they know. They're describing the stuff in the way that they understand it. And if I tell them that they're wrong, well, then they won't trust me that I know what I'm doing because I don't trust them, right? So using Gherkin, using a technique or a technology outside of the process helps deflect the blame or the defensiveness that a client might feel when I tell them that, no, this is not the way you're supposed to be doing it. This is the way you're supposed to be doing it. It's not a thing of them being stupid. It's being a thing of they haven't learned it yet. Go ahead, yeah. Right. Right. Right.
Hello? Okay. I'm just about done anyway, so I'm done. But yeah, it's really about the conversations we have, how we poke our holes into what the client wants, right? You'll find like people like what's her name, Liz. I forget her surname now, but she talks about it. You look up her blog, Liz Keogh, right? Dan North. They talk. What's his name? Another guy. Deliberate discovery, feature injection. All these things are not about writing code, actually.
Right. It's about a process, and the Gherkin syntax that was created acts as a vehicle for that process, and that's why I like it so much, and that's why I advocate for it. So yeah, BDD, TDD, that stuff. It's not necessarily for code only, as he described eloquently. So yeah. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you listening.